Have you ever deployed a service in AWS, you're all excited, and then you spend the next few hours just trying to figure out why you can't connect to it? Yeah, if that sounds familiar, this guide is definitely for you. We're about to clear up a really common but super frustrating networking problem in AWS, so let's just dive right in.
The whole issue often comes down to this one simple question. Is your firewall actually blocking AWS Route 53? It's a tiny detail that's so easy to overlook, but believe me, it is very often the root cause of all these connectivity headaches. You've been there, right? That moment when everything looks okay, all your services are running green, but you just can't reach them? Well, I'm here to tell you, more often than not, this isn't some weird bug in your app. It's almost always a misconfigured firewall or security group that's blocking essential traffic. Okay, so how do we solve this? Well, we need to go straight to the source of truth. AWS actually publishes this definitive JSON file that has all of its IP address ranges. And that file is the key to figuring out exactly what we need to let through our firewalls. And honestly, it's a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you're going to grab a file from AWS called ipranges.json. Then, second, you'll search inside that file for the specific service keys we're about to talk about. And finally, you just take those IP ranges and add them as allow rules in your security groups or firewalls. It's really as simple as that. So first up is the Route 53 service key. This one's a biggie. If you ever want to run basic DNS diagnostics, using command line tools like dig or NSLOOKUP to check on your domain's records, you absolutely have to allow traffic from the IP ranges that are tied to this key. And what are these exactly? Well, think of them as the authoritative servers. When some person or some service asks, hey, where can I find myapp.com? These are the servers that give the official answer. They're literally the backbone of your domain's accessibility on the internet. So just to sum it up for the Route 53 key, its main job is to allow those crucial DNS queries. And here's the best part. As you can see right here, AWS says these IP addresses are static. That's fantastic news, because it means once you set this firewall rule, you probably won't have to touch it ever again. But just being able to find your server is only half the battle. We also need to make sure our services are actually healthy and online. And this brings us to the super critical topic of health checks. Route 53 health checks are basically AWS's way of constantly poking your applications or your endpoints and asking, hey, you okay over there? If a server doesn't respond correctly, Route 53 can just automatically redirect traffic over to a healthy one. But, and this is a big but, for any of this to work, the health checkers have to be able to reach your stuff in the first place. So, to get this working, we need our second service key, Route 53 health checks. You have to allow traffic from these IP ranges for your monitoring to work. Now, the key fact here is that while these IPs aren't technically 100% static, AWS confirms they rarely change. So you'll want to keep an eye on the list, but you're not going to be updating your rules every single day. Now, here's a quick but really important warning for you. When you're searching that file, you're also going to see a key called Route 53 _health_checks publishing. You can, and you absolutely should, completely ignore this one. The documentation is crystal clear. These are only used internally by AWS, so you don't need to add them to your firewall rules. This little tip will save you from adding a bunch of unnecessary clutter. All right, so we've covered the whole manual process of finding and adding these IPs, but let's be honest, this can get really tedious, especially as you scale up. What if there was a more elegant, automated way to manage all of this? Well, there is, and it's a feature that is going to make your life a whole lot easier. Let me introduce you to AWS prefix lists. A prefix list is basically just a named collection of IP address ranges. So instead of manually adding dozens of individual IP rules to all your security groups, you can just reference a single prefix list. It is a total game changer for simplifying your firewall management. And this just shows the difference so perfectly. I mean, look at this. On the left, you've got the old way, copying and pasting the same long list of IP addresses into every single security group. It's tedious and is just a recipe for making mistakes. But on the right, you have the new way. You manage all those IPs in one central place. And even better, if you use an AWS managed list, AWS handles all the updates for you automatically. This quote from the AWS documentation really says it all. The power here is at centralized management. If you need to make a change, you do it in one spot, the prefix list, not across dozens of different rules. That saves time and just dramatically reduces the chance of making a mistake. And the best part is that AWS provides these managed prefix lists for its own services. These are basically prepackaged lists, created and maintained entirely by AWS. You can't change them, but you can use them in your own security groups, totally free. For Route 53 health checks, this means you just reference the official AWS list, and you will always have the most up-to-date IP ranges with zero effort on your part.
So let's just recap the key takeaways here. Your source of truth is always that IP ranges JSON file. You need to allow traffic for two main services, Route 53 for your DNS queries and Route 53 health checks for monitoring. But the most important takeaway is this. To make your life easier and your infrastructure way more robust, use the AWS managed prefix lists instead of trying to manage all these IPs by hand.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Look, getting the rules right is the first step, that's for sure. But the real question when you're building scalable, secure systems in the cloud is this: is your configuration actually manageable? Moving from manual IP lists to managed prefix lists isn't just a quick fix, it's a strategy.